I've only been to Nashville once, but the time I spent there was remarkably memorable. A majestic city situated amongst green, rolling hills, forever encased in a climate of warm but moderate spring weather. Where the food is great, the music is better, and the term Southern hospitality is an understatement. But my time in Nashville is memorable for another reason. An astonishing revelation by members of my family opened my mind to the possibility of lingering spirits that remain in our plane in some form. I personally have never seen a ghost, but have had some interesting experiences regarding a medical prescription of codeine, strange dreams, and sleep paralysis. Also, I find myself waking at night around 3 a.m., the witching hour. But that requires further analysis and speculation, and is not the topic of this reflection. Back to Nashville. I'm 19 years old and spending my Easter vacation in Nashville with my family. My cousin is a student at Rhodes in Memphis, so Nashville was the rallying point for my family and my father's 3 sisters and their families. As a college undergraduate, a few years short of the drinking age, I didn't get to spend my Saturday evening experiencing Nashville's watering holes. Instead, I embarked on a ghost tour through historic Nashville. As we waited across from a famous Nashville hotel, renowned for its ghostly inhabitants that walk the halls, our eccentric tour guide was late. When he arrived, he looked like a 19th century ghostbuster. Short of stature and lacking in hair, this excitable, borderline rude tour guide was not what I expected. Already, the tour seemed like a waste of money and time. Before we disembark on this journey through time in Nashville, and the paranormal experiences revealed by the tour guide and my family, let me give you a little background into my family on my father's side. My grandparents met in Hawaii during World War II. My grandfather was an officer on a Navy LCT. My grandmother, a Navy nurse. My grandmother was part of a nursing corps that bravely volunteered to investigate a mysterious illness that quarantined Marines and sailors from the rest of the population for fear of pandemic. The illness ended up being a flu variation, but she was commended for her valor. My grandfather participated in several combat beach landings. On one occasion, the ship next to his communications tower was destroyed by enemy mortar fire. Both returned healthy from the war and married and had 4 children, my father being the youngest. My grandmother's parents immigrated from Ireland and Poland. My grandfathers both came from Poland. At a very young age, my grandmother's mother passed away, leaving her to help her father raise 5 boys. My aunts are all different and wonderful in their own ways. My Aunt Patty is the eldest and has 3 daughters. Her middle child is the reason we were vacationing in Tennessee. My Aunt Coraline came next. She has 2 daughters, both out of college and teaching at this point. Her youngest, my cousin Robbie, is probably my best and oldest friend. Then comes my Aunt Sally, the most eccentric of the family, yet also the most quiet and humble. Perhaps eccentric isn't the right term, more like open-minded. Her oldest, Will, is definitely eccentric, but also a world-class storyteller. Also probably my best friend. Willie has been a high school soccer star, MMA fighter, mixologist, a writer, and currently works in Antarctica. He's a world traveler with the craziest stories. A fan of fantasy stories from an early age, he used to tell us he was an alien or a vampire because he never slept. Big into philosophy and mysticism, Will always makes for great conversation. Recently, he told me he was attempting to infiltrate a group of vampires. Bullshit was my first reaction, but I egged him on to the disdain of my younger brother Tim and my friend Nico, both trapped in the car with us on a 5-hour drive back from Vermont. Will has 2 younger siblings, both awesome in their own respects, but not as interesting as Will. So here we are, the whole clan assembled in Nashville, ready to embark on a spiritual journey through Nashville, hunting for the metaphysical remains of some of the city's former inhabitants. As I stated earlier, we were waiting across from a hotel that we weren't allowed to enter, but was reported to be haunted by a ghost of a beautiful woman, whose story for haunting the premises escapes me at the moment. What I remember is that at this point I was introduced to the orb in regards to the paranormal. An orb is the captured image of a ghost or a spirit, according to our guide. He produced several pictures taken in and outside the hotel with orbs floating in them. I thought that was particularly cool. As we traveled the streets, we stopped at the Capitol building to try and catch a glimpse of the dead wife of Andrew Jackson, my favorite president. One other sight was the back door of a nightclub where a famous jazz club owner, mobster, was stabbed to death. Nothing here either. This whole time, I was hoping to see something paranormal, but doubted anything would animate before our eyes. Yet I still clung to the hope. I'm a rational person, but I believe that the world is more magical than we like to believe. I don't know if they exist, but I hope there are Bigfoot roaming our wilderness. I lived in Burlington, Vermont on Lake Champlain and hoped I'd get to see the legendary Champ, a creature comparable to the monster of Loch Ness. Therefore, I could confirm that there is indeed more to this world. As I grew increasingly bored by what became basically a roam around Nashville with my family, some strangers, and our bizarre, poorly dressed troop leader to the spirit world, I thought I'd have some fun with my Aunt Sally. My Aunt Sally, like her son Will, was a fan of fantasy novels, had an open mind, and according to my father was a hippie during the 60s. If anyone had thought they'd seen a ghost, I was sure it would be her. So, sick of listening to the guide and not finding a speck of evidence of paranormal activity, I approached my Aunt Sally. Our conversation went something like this. "So, Aunt Sally, do you believe in ghosts?" "Yeah, I think so." "Have you ever seen a ghost before or anything like that?" Hoping please say yes. "Well, actually, when I was a little girl, oh my God, I knew it. She's crazy, just like her son. I can't wait to hear what nonsense is going to come out of my aunt's mouth." Who, by the way, is also a researcher for a leading pharmaceutical company. When we lived at the old house that your great-granddad lived in, I used to wake up at night, look down the hall, and see a woman smoking a cigarette down in the living room. She was beautiful, wore a red dress, and would rock back and forth in her chair, always smoking a cigarette. I assumed it was a friend of my mother or father's because they both never smoked, but didn't mind if others did in the house. But it was always so late. I was dumbfounded, and at the same time a little underwhelmed by her story. I was hoping for something more fantastic, more scary, like Will and his vampire stories. This paranormal sighting was believable, but not the malevolent spirit poltergeist type of story I was expecting. "Wow, that's interesting," I said, and left it at that. Moving on to my Aunt Patty, who is also my godmother, and an aunt I am very close with and like to joke around with. I was looking forward to telling her the story I had heard from her sister. Instead, I asked her if she had ever seen a ghost or anything paranormal. Her reply was even more shocking. "You're not going to believe me, but yeah, I think I did when I was a little girl at our old house on Travers Street." My aunt is usually a very stoic, rational woman and strictly Catholic. Her belief in ghosts extends as far as the resurrection of the Savior, or so I assumed. My bed used to be placed against the wall facing the door, looking all the way down the hall. And when I was a kid, I would sometimes wake up at night and see a woman in a red dress smoking cigarettes in a rocking chair. I always thought it was a dream, but it happened more than once. Did my dad see it too? I wondered. I don't think so, because your dad was too young. We didn't live in that house when he was born, but you can ask him. It probably was just a dream, but it was so real. She was so vivid, extremely pretty too. Did you ever try to get up and talk to her? No. Why? I don't know. I guess I was a little bit scared, and she was just sitting there all the time. So peaceful, smoking her cigarettes, reading a book. I guess I was scared or too tired. Okay, now 2 out of 3 of my aunts have described strikingly similar descriptions of a paranormal experience. Before going on to my third aunt, Aunt Coraline, I talked to my dad. "Hey, you won't believe this. I just spoke with Aunt Sally and Aunt Patty about ghosts, right? Well, they both told me the exact same story. How crazy is that?" "That's crazy," he said, clearly not as blown away as I was. So I moved on to Aunt Coraline. "Hey, Aunt Coraline." "Hello, Edward. Isn't this so much fun?" "Yeah, this city itself is awesome. I want to come back someday." 6 years later, and I have regrettably not been back. And so much history. She knows I love history. "Yeah, this is great. So, Aunt Coraline, have you ever seen a ghost?" This was a sensitive subject. One that I hesitated to bring up because her husband, an uncle dear to my heart, who died too young of a heart attack, had passed away, widowing her about 4 years earlier at the age of 50. "Well, you know what, Eddie? her voice got softer, almost to a whisper. "When I was little, I used to have a room at the end of the hallway when you were gone, when your Aunt Patty moved into her other room at our old house." "Do you remember that house?" Not really, I thought, but what I said was, "Yeah, I remember it." I don't know if it was just a dream, but I used to see a woman in a red dress with beautiful blonde hair sitting in the living room sometimes late at night. "You sure it wasn't just Grandma?" This was getting very eerie, but I felt part detective at this point, unraveling a decades-old ghost story, one witness at a time. "I don't think so, because her hair was so blonde, and she was thinner than Grandma, but with a similar face." "This is crazy. Have you ever told Aunt Patty or Aunt Sally about this?" "No." "Why not?" "I'm not sure. I guess I didn't think much of it, that it was just a dream." "I don't think it was a dream," I told her, "because they all just told me that exact same story." Immediately, she called back to her sister Patty, who was walking towards the back of the tour with my mother. Then she got her other sister, my Aunt Sally, and they shared their experiences. All had the same experience, except my Aunt Coraline remembered one night where the beautiful stranger in the house looked up at her, causing her to close her eyes. But when she opened them again, the woman in red was still there, smiling at her from her chair in the living room. The specter no longer frightened them. In fact, it never did. The sight of this mysterious woman in their home was a surprise to all of them, but also calming at the same time. Before the tour was done, we speculated that it could possibly be a glimpse of my great-grandmother, who died when my grandma was very young. Her cause of death, lung cancer. I have a theory on ghost sightings. From what I've seen and read, those that remain behind are usually those that experience great tragedy. But in some cases, it can be great joy as well. Perhaps human experience, emotions, can imprint on this reality, sealing a glimmer of a moment in history forever in this plane. I don't think ghosts are lost souls wandering, although they could be, or maybe some of them are, but more of a moment trapped in history. Most of these specters are seen repeating things and are associated with tragedy and loss. The women in the hotel, wandering the halls, Andrew Jackson's wife roaming the Capitol building, and the beautiful stranger in my grandparents' home, always in her chair, smoking her cigarettes. Or maybe this was my great-grandmother, visiting her granddaughters that she was unable to meet in the flesh, watching over them carefully as they slept each night. More guardian angel than wandering spirit.